The crystal chandeliers of Rousseau's cast dancing shadows across the white linen tablecloths as Manhattan's elite clinked their champagne glasses. This wasn't just any restaurant, it was the restaurant, where reservations required 6 months' notice and connections that money alone couldn't buy. Marcus Blackwell sat at his usual corner table, the one with the perfect view of both the dining room and the entrance. He liked watching people crane their necks to see him, whispering behind their menus about the tech billionaire who'd revolutionized cloud computing before his 30th birthday. Now, at 37, his net worth had crossed 15 billion, and he wore that number like armor. "Your wine, Mr. Blackwell?" a young waitress said softly, approaching with a bottle of 1947 Chateau d'Yquem that cost more than most people's cars. Marcus didn't look up from his phone. He was in the middle of composing a scathing email to his CFO about quarterly projections. The woman poured carefully, the golden liquid catching the light. "Will there be anything else? Did I say you could speak?" Marcus's voice cut through the air like a whip. Several nearby diners glanced over, then quickly away. Everyone knew better than to stare at Marcus Blackwell. The waitress, her name tag read Sarah, stepped back, her face flushing. "I apologize, sir. I was just—" "You were just what? Interrupting me?" He finally looked up, his ice-blue eyes sharp with irritation. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, Mr. Blackwell. Again, I'm very sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it in my world, sweetheart." He returned to his phone, dismissing her with a wave. "Go fetch me the manager. Tell him I want someone competent serving my table." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she nodded and walked away. Marcus watched her go with satisfaction. People needed to know their place. That's what his father had taught him, back when they'd had nothing. Back before Marcus had clawed his way to the top, leaving anyone who couldn't keep up in the dust. The manager, Pierre, materialized within moments. A thin man with an impeccable suit and the perpetual anxiety of someone whose livelihood depended on pleasing impossible people. "Mr. Blackwell, I understand there's been an issue?" "That waitress," Marcus said, not bothering to lower his voice. "She's incompetent. I want her removed from my section. Actually, I want her fired. Tonight." Pierre's face went pale. "Sir, Sarah is one of our best. I don't care if she's the Pope's daughter. I want her gone, or I'll make sure the Times knows that Rousseau's has fallen from grace." Marcus leaned back, watching Pierre squirm. This was power. This was control. "Your choice, Pierre." The manager nodded slowly. I'll handle it, sir." "See that you do." Marcus returned his attention to his phone, already forgetting the interaction. Just another Tuesday evening. But then something unexpected happened. "Before we continue, kindly tell us where you are watching from." Pierre walked back toward the kitchen, but instead of going through the swinging doors, he stopped. He stood very still for a moment, and then he turned around. He walked back to Marcus's table with a strange expression on his face. Something that might have been resolve or resignation, or perhaps freedom. "No," Pierre said simply. Marcus looked up, certain he'd misheard. "Excuse me? I said no, Mr. Blackwell. I won't fire Sarah. In fact, I won't be serving you anymore tonight. I'd like you to leave." The entire restaurant had gone silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to have stopped. Marcus felt heat rising up his neck. "Do you have any idea what you just did? I'll destroy this restaurant. I'll destroy you. You'll what?" The voice came from behind him. Marcus turned to see Sarah standing there, but something about her had changed. She wasn't trembling anymore. She stood straight, and there was something in her eyes that made him uncomfortable. "You'll ruin us? With what, exactly?" "With my influence. With my money. With your grandfather's money, you mean?" Marcus froze. "What did you just say?" Sarah stepped closer, and now Marcus could see that other staff members were gathering. The sommelier, the sous chef, even some of the regular diners were standing up, moving closer with expressions he couldn't quite read. "Your grandfather, Robert Blackwell," Sarah continued, her voice steady and clear. "The man who actually built Blackwell Technologies. The man who believed in treating people with dignity and respect. The man whose philosophy was that a company is only as good as it treats its lowest paid employee. How dare you speak about my grandfather? I dare because I knew him. Sarah's eyes were bright now, not with tears but with something fiercer. I knew him very well, actually. He used to come to the soup kitchen where I volunteered every Saturday. He'd serve meals alongside us, talk to the homeless folks like they were his friends, which they were. He never told anyone his real name there, just went by Rob. It wasn't until his funeral that I realized who he really was. Marcus's mouth had gone dry. His grandfather had died 3 years ago, and yes, there had been rumors about his charitable work, but your grandfather left very specific instructions, Sarah continued. He left the bulk of his wealth to charity, yes, but he also left something else. A test. A test, Marcus heard himself say. For you. Sarah pulled something from her pocket. A sealed envelope, expensive paper, with the Blackwell family crest embossed on it. He left 37 of these letters. One for every year of your life. They were to be given to you under specific circumstances, witnessed and verified by someone he trusted. She held up the envelope, and Marcus could see his name written in his grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Your grandfather knew what kind of man you were becoming, Sarah said softly now. He saw how the money was changing you, how power was corrupting you. So he set up a foundation, a secret one. Over the past 3 years, we've been watching you, Marcus, documenting every cruel word, every person you've destroyed, every kindness you've denied. Marcus felt like the floor was tilting. This is insane. You can't. 42 people, Sarah interrupted. That's how many people you've had fired from various establishments over the past 3 years for minor infractions. 17 of them were single parents. 23 were struggling with medical bills. All of them were just trying to survive, and you crushed them like insects because you could. She placed the envelope on the table. Your grandfather's will had a clause. If, by your 37th birthday, you had not demonstrated basic human decency, as measured by an independent panel of ethics experts, then your voting shares in Blackwell Technologies would be transferred to a trust. A trust that would use the profits to help everyone you've hurt. Marcus lunged for the envelope, tearing it open with shaking hands. Inside was indeed his grandfather's handwriting. My dear Marcus, if you're reading this, then I have failed you. Or perhaps I succeeded in building a fortune but failed in building a man. The wealth I created was meant to be a tool for good, not a weapon for ego. You don't remember this, but when you were 7 years old, we went to a diner. The waitress accidentally spilled water on your shirt, and you were ready to cry. But then you saw that she was crying too. She was terrified of losing her job. Do you remember what you did? You told her it was okay. You said accidents happen. You even made her laugh. That's the boy I loved. That's the man I hoped you'd become. But power changed you as I feared it would. You've become the very thing I fought against my entire life. Someone who measures worth in dollar signs and treats human beings as disposable. So I leave you with a choice. This letter is your notice. You have 1 year. 1 year to prove that the boy who comforted that crying waitress still exists somewhere inside the man you've become. 1 year to repair the damage you've done, to help those you've hurt, to remember that wealth is a responsibility, not a right. Fail, and the Blackwell fortune will be used to build a world you no longer control. Succeed, and perhaps you'll build something even more valuable, a soul worth having. The choice, as always, was yours. Your grandfather, Robert. Marcus's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the letter. He looked up at Sarah, at Pierre, at all the people watching him. This can't be legal. I'll fight this. You'll lose, a new voice said. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward from the crowd. Marcus recognized him as James Chun, one of the top attorneys in New York. I helped your grandfather draft the documents myself. Everything is ironclad. The ethics panel has already made their determination. You have 365 days starting tomorrow to demonstrate genuine change, Mr. Blackwell. Genuine repair of the harm you've caused. And if I don't? Then you'll still be wealthy, Sarah said. Your grandfather made sure you'd never be poor, but you'll lose control of the company. You'll lose the power you've abused. You'll lose the ability to hurt people on a whim. Marcus looked around the restaurant. Every face was watching him, waiting. Some looked satisfied. Some looked sad. None looked afraid of him anymore. And that's when it happened. The rage that had been building in his chest suddenly boiled over. Before he could think, before he could stop himself, Marcus stood up and swung his hand. The slap connected with Sarah's cheek with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent restaurant. "How dare you?" he hissed. "How dare all of you judge me? You have no idea what it takes to build what I've built, to maintain what I—" He stopped because Sarah was laughing. Not crying. Laughing. "Thank you," she said, touching her reddening cheek. "Thank you so much, Marcus." "What?" She pulled out her phone. The camera had been recording. "That's assault, Marcus. Witnessed by approximately 50 people. Which means that, as of this moment, we have grounds to pursue criminal charges." "You set me up," Marcus whispered. "No," Sarah said firmly. "Your grandfather gave you every opportunity to be better. We documented your behavior hoping you'd change course. But you," she shook her head, "you just proved exactly who you are. The panel required that we give you this notification, that we offer you a chance at redemption. But honestly, I don't think anyone really expected you to accept it with grace. We certainly didn't expect you to assault someone." James Chun stepped forward again. "Mr. Blackwell, you now have several choices. You can leave quietly and we'll proceed with the terms of your grandfather's will. You can make a scene, in which case Ms. Martinez here will press charges and you'll learn what the inside of a police station looks like. Or, Marcus's voice came out as a croak. Or you can sit down, finish your very expensive wine, and actually listen for once in your privileged life." Marcus looked at the exit. He could leave. He could call his lawyers, start a war. But something in James Chen's eyes told him that war was already lost. His grandfather had planned this too well. Slowly, feeling like a puppet with cut strings, Marcus sat down. "Good," Sarah said. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him, uninvited. "Let me tell you about the people you've hurt, Marcus. Let me tell you their stories. Because that's where your year begins, with understanding. My year. Your grandfather's challenge. You have 1 year to make amends. To help rebuild the lives you've damaged. To prove that somewhere under all that arrogance and cruelty, there's still a human being worth saving. And if I refuse? Then you refuse," Sarah said simply. "You keep your money. You lose your power. And you live the rest of your life knowing you had a chance to honor a good man's legacy and you chose yourself instead." Marcus stared at her name tag, at her clear, unwavering eyes. "Who are you, really?" "I told you. I'm a waitress. I'm also a social worker. I'm also someone who knew your grandfather and saw how much it broke his heart, watching you become this." She gestured at him, and somehow that simple gesture felt more cutting than any insult. "But I'm also someone who believes people can change. Your grandfather believed it too, even when you gave him no reason to." "He was a fool," Marcus said bitterly. "Maybe," Sarah agreed, "or maybe he was the wisest man either of us will ever meet. He certainly knew you better than you know yourself." She stood up, and Pierre approached with a folder, thick, professional, filled with documents. "Everything is in here," Pierre explained, his voice gentler now. "Names, addresses, circumstances of every person whose life you've disrupted through your actions at various establishments in Manhattan over the past 3 years. Your grandfather's foundation has already tracked them all down. Some have moved. Some have recovered. Some haven't." "What am I supposed to do with this?" Marcus asked. "That's up to you," Sarah said. "But if I were you, I'd start with 'I'm sorry.' Those are words I bet you haven't said in a long, long time." She turned to leave, but Marcus found himself speaking. "Wait." Sarah paused. "The woman in the diner. When I was 7. Do you know what happened to her?" "Your grandfather kept track of her," Sarah said quietly. "Her name was Margaret Chen. She worked 3 jobs to support her kids. One of them is standing right behind you." Marcus turned to see James Chun looking at him with an expression that was impossible to read. "My mother died when I was 16, James said. "Worked herself to death trying to provide for us. But she used to tell me about a little boy who showed her kindness once when she needed it most. She said it kept her going that day, knowing that not everyone in the world would treat her like dirt." He paused. "She'd be disappointed to see what you became, Mr. Blackwell. But she'd also want you to know it's not too late. It's never too late to choose differently." The folder sat on the table between them, thick with consequences and possibilities. "1 year," Sarah repeated. "Starting tomorrow. The clock's ticking, Marcus. Choose wisely." And with that she walked away. Pierre followed. James Chun gave him a small nod and departed. The restaurant slowly returned to life around him. Conversations resuming, silverware clinking. The world moving on as if the ground hadn't just shifted beneath Marcus Blackwell's feet. Marcus sat alone at his corner table, the bottle of expensive wine growing warm, the folder sitting before him like a judgment. Through the window he could see the lights of Manhattan. His city, his kingdom, his cage. He opened the folder. The first name stared up at him. Jennifer Woods. Single mother, 2 children. Fired from Bistro Laurent after Marcus Blackwell complained about slow service. Unable to find new employment due to blacklisting. Currently 3 months behind on rent. There was an address, a phone number, a photograph, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes. Marcus pulled out his phone. He could call his lawyers. He could fight this. He could. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. The choice, as always, was yours. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Blackwell didn't know what to do. The power he'd wielded so carelessly was gone. Stripped away not by force but by the simple truth of his own actions. He looked at Jennifer Woods's photograph again. "I'm sorry." The words felt foreign in his mind, impossible on his tongue. But his grandfather had believed he could say them. Had believed he could mean them. Maybe that old fool knew something after all. Marcus Blackwell stood up, left $200 on the table for Sarah's trouble, and walked out into the New York night carrying a folder full of his sins and 1 year to make them right. Behind him, in the kitchen of Rousseau's, Sarah Martinez smiled and made a phone call. "It's done," she said. He took the folder. I think maybe Rob was right about him after all." On the other end of the line, the voice of the foundation's director, another person whose life Robert Blackwell had touched, replied, "Then let's hope Marcus is his grandfather's grandson after all. That old man never gave up on anyone." "No," Sarah agreed, touching her still stinging cheek. "He never did. And somewhere, in whatever place good men go when they die." Robert Blackwell smiled and waited to see if his gamble on his grandson's soul would finally pay off. The story of Marcus Blackwell was far from over. It was only just beginning. 6 months later, the community center in Brooklyn was nothing like the places Marcus Blackwell used to frequent. The linoleum was cracked, the fluorescent lights flickered, and the coffee tasted like it had been brewed during the previous administration. But Marcus had learned to drink it without complaint. "Mr. Blackwell?" Jennifer Woods approached him, her 2 children trailing behind her. The little boy, Tommy, waved shyly. The girl, Alicia, stared at him with the suspicious eyes of a 9-year-old who'd learned too young that adults couldn't always be trusted. "Ms. Woods," Marcus said, standing. "Thank you for coming." It had taken 3 months of phone calls, apologies, and practical help before Jennifer had agreed to meet him face to face. He'd paid her back rent. He'd used his connections to get her hired at a place that would treat her right. But none of that felt like enough. "The kids wanted to meet you," Jennifer said carefully. "After everything. They wanted to see the man who helped us." "I'm the man who hurt you first," Marcus said, and the words came easier now. He'd said them 41 times. Once for each person on the list. "I'm sorry for that. Truly sorry." Alicia studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "Mama says you're trying to be better." "I am." "Why?" It was such a simple question. Such an impossibly complex answer. Marcus knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Because someone believed I could be," he said finally. And I didn't want to prove him wrong. The girl seemed to accept this. She nodded solemnly and took her mother's hand. We should go, Jennifer said. But Marcus? Thank you. Not just for the help. For the apology. That mattered more than you know. As they left, Marcus felt Sarah's presence beside him. She'd been there for all 42 meetings, a witness and a guide through his year of amends. How are you holding up? She asked. Tired, Marcus admitted. Broke, relatively speaking. And I think I understand now what my grandfather was trying to teach me. He looked at his hands. Hands that had built an empire, hands that had hurt so many people, hands that were finally learning to help instead. Money doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you loud. Real power is in knowing you can make someone's day worse and choosing not to. Choosing better. Sarah smiled. Your grandfather would be proud. I have 6 months left, Marcus said. What happens after? If I pass their test? That depends, Sarah said. What do you want to happen? Marcus looked around the community center, at the after-school program he'd funded, at the job training center that bore his grandfather's name, at all the quiet, unglamorous work of actually helping people. I want to do this, he said. Not for a year. Not to pass a test. Just because it matters. Then you already passed, Sarah told him. The panel made their determination last week. You get to keep your shares. Congratulations, Mr. Blackwell. You're still a billionaire. Marcus had imagined this moment for months. The relief, the vindication, the return to power. But all he felt was quiet. I think, he said slowly, I'd like to give most of it away. Keep enough to live comfortably. Use the rest the way grandfather did. Is that crazy? Probably, Sarah said, but she was grinning. Want some help? I happen to know a very good social worker who's got experience dealing with reformed, arrogant billionaires. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. Something he hadn't done in years. I'd like that very much. They walked out of the community center together, into a Brooklyn afternoon that smelled like rain and new beginnings. Marcus Blackwell was still wealthy, still powerful. But for the first time in his adult life, he was something more important. He was decent. And somewhere, somehow, his grandfather was smiling.